Today we are going to talk about dividing positive and negative fractions. But before we begin, I'd like to review our multiplying and dividing integer rules. When I multiply by two positives or two negatives, I will get positive products. When I multiply two positives or two negatives, I will get positive products. If I have one positive and one negative, I will always get a negative product. Similar with our division. If I divide two positives or two negatives, my quotients will be positive. Whereas if I divide by one positive and one negative, my quotients will always be negative. All right, so let's take a look at our dividing fractions. Okay, so when we divide fractions, it's very similar to dividing fractions without positive or negative. So let's go ahead and start with just two positive fractions, and let's review how to divide. So if I have 1/4 divided by 3/5, we remember that we multiply by the reciprocal. So I keep my first fraction the same, which is 1/4. I multiply in place of division by the reciprocal, which is my flip. We remember that as KCF or KFC or however you remember it. I change my division to multiplication and flip my second fraction. From here, I multiply across just like I multiply fractions regularly. 1 times 5 is 5, and 4 times 3 is 12. So 1/4 divided by 3/5 is going to get me a 5/12 total. All right, let's try that with two negative fractions. We know from our integer rules that when I divide two negatives, that will get me a positive quotient. So let's see here. We've got -4/5 divided by -2/3. We remember that we multiply by the reciprocal, so my first fraction stays the same. My division changes to multiplication, and my second fraction flips. Now, when I have a negative fraction, that negative is for the fraction. So up here, for space purposes, I attach it to the numerator, which you can attach it to the numerator. We don't typically attach it to the denominator, or it can just hang out outside here. All right. So now I multiply straight across. I have -4 times -3, which is going to get me positive. Again, two negatives being multiplied together is going to get me a positive. And then I multiply across by 5 times 2, which equals 10. I can simplify that down. And then I can turn that into a mixed number. I can also go ahead and cancel those out if I want to turn that into 2 and 1, and that'll get me my 6/5 quicker. And then I've got, again, still my 1 and 1/5 as my quotient. One more example here, and that's with a positive and a negative. So just like with dividing integers, multiplying integers, I go ahead, I rewrite it. But because one is positive and one is negative, I will have a negative quotient here. So let's go ahead and keep the first fraction, change to multiplication, and flip my second. Again, this time I can cancel out, giving me 5 times -1, -5, over 3 times 1, which is 3. I can turn that into a mixed number by saying -1 and 2/3 as my answer. So again, remembering that we use KCF, we multiply by the reciprocal. We keep our first fraction the same, change our division into multiplication, and flip our second fraction and multiply across. And then also we remember those integer rules. If we're multiplying or dividing by two positives or two negatives, we will get positive results. Whereas if we have one positive, one negative, we will get a negative result.